I've worked the emergency dispatch line for 3 years. Yesterday, I learned what a null caller designation means, and they keep calling back. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night during what should have been a routine graveyard shift. My name is Natalie Kemp, and I'd been working emergency dispatch for the city of Portland for 3 years, long enough to handle domestic violence calls without my voice shaking, long enough to talk suicidal callers down from bridges, long enough to coordinate multi-vehicle accidents while simultaneously eating a sandwich because you learn to compartmentalize or you don't last. The job requires you to be calm when everyone else is panicking, to extract critical information from people having the worst moments of their lives, to make split-second decisions that determine whether someone lives or dies. I was good at it, had commendations in my file, had been told I'd make supervisor within 5 years if I wanted it. Then I took that call, and everything I thought I understood about my job turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. The system flagged it immediately, before I even answered, which was unusual. Most calls come through with basic location data and a callback number, maybe a name if it's from a registered phone. This one showed up with a designation I'd never seen before, Null 47 active in red text across the top of my screen. No location data, no callback number, just that red designation blinking with an urgency that made my stomach tighten. I glanced at my supervisor's station, but Derek was dealing with a multi-alarm fire on the east side and hadn't noticed. The call was ringing through and I had 3 seconds to decide whether to answer or route it to someone else. Protocol said answer every call within 4 rings. I clicked to connect. 911. What's your emergency? My voice had that practiced calm that comes from 3 years of repetition. There was breathing on the other end, shallow and rapid, the sound of someone in distress but not yet speaking. I waited, counting to 5 in my head, giving them time to gather their thoughts. This is 911 Emergency Services. Can you tell me what's happening? More breathing, and then a voice, female, mid-30s maybe, with an accent I couldn't immediately place. I need help. Someone's trying to kill me. I'm in a basement. I don't know where. They took my phone, but I found this old landline and I don't know how much time I have before they come back. The words tumbled out in a rush and I was already typing, flagging the call as active threat, potential kidnapping, trying to get location data even though my screen was still showing null values for everything. Okay, I'm going to help you. What's your name? There was a pause, longer than it should have been, and when she spoke again her voice had changed slightly, less panicked, more confused. My name is Rebecca Caldwell. But that's not right. That can't be right because Rebecca Caldwell is dead. I attended her funeral 6 months ago. I saw them lower the casket into the ground. My hand froze over the keyboard. The forbidden name list flashed through my mind, but that wasn't important now. Ma'am, can you tell me where you are? Any details about the building, the street, anything you can see or hear? She wasn't listening. I died 6 months ago. There was a car accident on Highway 26. They said I was killed instantly, and my family had a funeral. And I was there somehow, watching them cry. But I wasn't in the casket. The casket was empty and nobody seemed to notice, and now I'm here and I don't understand what's happening. I signaled to Derek, trying to get his attention, but he was deep in the fire coordination. Rebecca, I need you to focus. You're in danger right now. Can you describe the basement? Are there windows, doors, any way out? The sound of footsteps came through the phone, heavy boots on stairs, and Rebecca's breathing accelerated into hyperventilation. They're coming back. Oh God, they're coming back. Please, you have to find me. You have to tell my family I'm not dead. I'm not dead. The line went dead. Not disconnected with a click. Just dead. Silence so complete it felt like the absence of sound rather than quiet. I immediately tried to call back but got a fast, busy signal. The call log showed the conversation had lasted 1 minute and 43 seconds, but when I tried to pull up the recording for review, the system returned an error message. File corrupted. Consult supervisor for null caller protocols. I stared at that message for 10 seconds, trying to process what it meant, and then I stood up and walked over to Derek's station. He was just finishing up with the fire department coordination, looking exhausted, and I almost didn't interrupt, but the red Null 47 active designation was still blinking on my screen. Derek, I need you to look at something. I just took a call with a designation I've never seen before and the recording won't play back. He followed me to my station and I watched his expression change from tired curiosity to something harder to read when he saw the red text. Fear maybe, or recognition. When did this come in? His voice was carefully neutral. 3 minutes ago. Woman claiming to be Rebecca Caldwell. Said she was kidnapped. Said she died 6 months ago. Then the line went dead. I can't pull location data, can't call back, and the recording is corrupted. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached past me and entered a supervisor override code that cleared the call from my screen entirely. What are you doing? We need to send police to check for... He cut me off. There's no address to send them to, Natalie. Null caller designation means the call didn't happen. It's a system glitch, a ghost in the network. Happens maybe once every few months, usually when phone lines get crossed or old equipment sends feedback into the system. You log it as a technical error and move on. I stared at him, trying to determine if he actually believed what he was saying, or if this was some kind of protocol I'd never been trained on. Derek, that woman sounded terrified. She gave specific details about being kidnapped, About a funeral, about... He interrupted again, which Derek never did unless something was seriously wrong. Natalie, I'm going to explain this once. Null Caller designation means the call originated from a number that doesn't exist in any database, routed through equipment that our system can't identify, from a location that triangulation can't pinpoint. It's technically impossible. It's a glitch. We get maybe 10 of these calls a year across the entire city, and every single time we've tried to investigate, we've found nothing. No missing person reports matching the caller's description, no evidence of any emergency, nothing. You spend time chasing these, you burn out. You learn to recognize them and move on. Something in his tone made me ask, have you taken one of these calls before? His jaw tightened. Twice. 3 years ago and 5 years ago. Both times I followed up, both times I found nothing, and both times I wasted department resources and got written up for abandoning protocol. Don't make my mistake. He walked back to his station, and I sat there staring at my now blank screen, trying to reconcile what he'd said with what I'd heard in Rebecca Caldwell's voice. That wasn't a glitch. That was a human being in genuine distress, giving me specific information about who she was and what had happened to her. I pulled up a search browser and typed in Rebecca Caldwell, Portland, Oregon, death, 2023 inches, and found the obituary immediately. Rebecca Ann Caldwell, age 34, died in a single-vehicle accident on Highway 26 on March 15th. Survived by parents Gerald and Susan Caldwell, brother Timothy Caldwell, preceded in death by grandmother Eleanor Vance. Services held at Riverside Memorial Chapel. In lieu of flowers, donations to the Portland Women's Shelter. I stared at the obituary photo and felt my skin go cold. The woman in the photo was smiling, healthy, alive. And 6 months after her supposed death, she'd called 911 from an unknown location claiming someone was trying to kill her. The rest of my shift was routine calls that I handled on autopilot while my mind kept circling back to that null 47 active designation and Derek's insistence that it meant nothing. At 7 a.m. when my replacement arrived, I clocked out, and instead of going home, I drove to the Portland Public Library and used their computers to search for more information about Rebecca Caldwell. Her social media accounts had been memorialized, filled with condolence messages from friends and family. Her LinkedIn profile showed she'd worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for Meridian Health Solutions, a mid-sized company based in Beaverton. The accident report was public record. She'd apparently driven off Highway 26 during a rainstorm, her car plunging down an embankment and catching fire. The body had been badly burned, identified through dental records. Closed casket funeral. I sat back in the library chair and thought about what she'd said. I attended her funeral. I saw them lower the casket into the ground. The casket was empty and nobody seemed to notice. What if she was telling the truth? What if Rebecca Caldwell hadn't died in that accident? What if someone had staged it and put her in that basement, and for 6 months she'd been trapped somewhere while everyone believed she was dead? The logistics of faking someone's death seemed impossibly complex, requiring cooperation from the coroner's office, the police, the funeral home, unless it didn't require cooperation at all. Unless it required something else. I drove to Meridian Health Solutions and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to decide if I was losing my mind. And then I walked into the reception area and asked to speak with someone from HR about Rebecca Caldwell. The receptionist's smile faltered slightly when I mentioned the name. I'm sorry, but Rebecca passed away several months ago. May I ask what this is regarding? I showed her my dispatch ID. I'm following up on a possible welfare check. I need to verify some information about her death. That was stretching the truth considerably, but it got me 10 minutes with an HR representative named Monica Vance who looked uncomfortable the moment I mentioned Rebecca's name. Look, I can't discuss personnel matters or circumstances around Rebecca's death, Monica said, but her body language was telling me something different. Defensive posture, hands clasped tight on her desk, eyes darting toward her computer screen every few seconds. I'm not asking about personnel matters. I'm trying to verify that Rebecca Caldwell died in a car accident on March 15th, and that her body was identified through dental records. Monica's expression shifted to something that might have been relief. Yes, that's correct. Tragic accident. She was a valued member of our team. I leaned forward slightly. Were you at the funeral? She blinked. Of course. Most of the department attended. And you saw the casket? Now she looked confused. It was closed casket due to the nature of the accident. Is there a problem? I was pushing into territory I had no authority to be in, but something in her tone kept me going. Did anything seem unusual about the funeral? About the circumstances of her death? About anything related to Rebecca in the weeks before the accident? Monica's expression closed down completely. I think this conversation is over. If you have official questions, you can route them through our legal department. She stood up and I knew I'd lost her, but as I was leaving, she said something that stopped me at the door. Rebecca was asking questions about pharmaceutical trial protocols 3 weeks before she died. Questions about what happens when test subjects show adverse reactions. Questions about whether data gets reported accurately to the FDA. She was told to focus on sales and leave regulatory concerns to the appropriate departments. I turned back. What kind of adverse reactions? Monica shook her head. I've already said too much. Please leave. I left Meridian Health Solutions with more questions than answers and drove to the address listed in Rebecca's obituary for her parents. The house was a modest two-story in the Laurelhurst neighborhood with a well-maintained garden and a car in the driveway. I sat outside for 15 minutes trying to figure out what I was going to say, and then I walked up and rang the doorbell. The woman who answered was in her early 60s, gray hair pulled back in a bun, wearing a cardigan despite the warm September weather. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, the look of someone who'd been crying recently or often. "Can I help you?" Her voice was cautious. "Mrs. Caldwell? My name is Natalie Kemp. I'm an emergency dispatcher with the city, and I need to ask you some questions about your daughter, Rebecca." I watched her face carefully as I said it, looking for any sign that she might know something was wrong, but all I saw was pain. Fresh grief that shouldn't be fresh after 6 months. "What kind of questions?" "Rebecca died in March. We've already spoken with police, with the insurance company, with everyone who needed information." I chose my next words carefully. "Have you received any communications from Rebecca since her death? Any calls, messages, anything unusual?" Susan Caldwell's face went pale and she gripped the doorframe hard enough that her knuckles turned white. "Who told you about the calls?" My heart started pounding. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened with these calls." She looked around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone was watching, then stepped back and gestured for me to come inside. The house was decorated with photos of Rebecca at various ages, smiling in graduation photos, vacation pictures, family gatherings. Susan led me to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee with shaking hands. 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call in the middle of the night. The voice sounded exactly like Rebecca. She said she was alive, that she needed help, that someone had faked her death and she was being held somewhere. She said she couldn't see anything because it was completely dark, but she could hear machinery, like industrial equipment. The call lasted maybe 30 seconds before it cut off. Susan's voice broke. "I tried to call the police, but when they came, they said I must have dreamed it or that it was a cruel prank. They said there was no record of any call coming into my phone at that time. They checked with the phone company and the phone company said their records showed no incoming calls." She pulled out her phone and showed me the call log. It was empty for that date and time. "Then it happened again, 5 days ago. Same voice, same message. 'I'm alive. Please help me. They're keeping me here.' And again, no record of the call anywhere except in my memory." I felt my hands shaking as I held my own coffee cup. "Mrs. Caldwell, I received a call at my dispatch station last night from someone claiming to be Rebecca. She said the same things, that she'd been kidnapped, that she'd attended her own funeral. The call was flagged with a designation I'd never seen before, and when I tried to follow up, my supervisor told me it was a system glitch and to forget about it." Susan's eyes filled with tears. "You believe me. You're the first person who's believed me. My husband thinks I'm having some kind of breakdown from grief. My son thinks I need psychiatric help. But I know my daughter's voice, and that was her, and she's out there somewhere and we buried an empty casket and nobody will listen." I pulled out my notebook. "I need you to tell me everything you can remember about the weeks before Rebecca's accident. Did she seem worried? Was she acting differently? Did she mention anything about work or problems she was having?" Susan wiped her eyes and nodded. "She was stressed about something at work. She wouldn't tell me specifics, said it was confidential, but she'd started keeping a journal, writing things down. She said if anything happened to her, we should look at the journal. But when we went through her apartment after the funeral, the journal wasn't there. We found her laptop, but it had been wiped clean, factory reset. Her phone was destroyed in the accident, supposedly." I leaned forward. "Did Rebecca have any connection to emergency services? Any reason she might know how to make untraceable calls?" Susan thought for a moment. "Her boyfriend worked in telecommunications, Kevin Russo. They'd been dating for about 8 months before her death. He was devastated at the funeral, completely broke down during the service. But now that I think about it, I haven't seen him since then. He used to visit regularly, but after the funeral, he just disappeared." I wrote down Kevin Russo's name. "Do you have contact information for him?" She pulled out an address book and gave me a phone number and an address in Southeast Portland. "If you find her," Susan said, gripping my hand hard enough to hurt, "if you find my daughter alive, you have to promise me you'll bring her home. I don't care what it takes or who I have to fight, I will not lose her again." I promised, not knowing if I could keep it, and left the Caldwell house with a growing sense that I'd stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than a series of strange phone calls. Kevin Russo lived in a rundown apartment building off Division Street, the kind of place with bars on the windows and security cameras that probably hadn't worked in years. I rang his buzzer but got no answer, so I waited in my car until someone came out and caught the door before it closed. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, and when I knocked, I heard movement inside but no one answered. "Kevin? My name is Natalie Kemp. I'm a 911 dispatcher and I need to talk to you about Rebecca Caldwell." Silence, then footsteps approaching the door. "Rebecca's dead." His voice was rough, like he'd been crying or smoking or both. "I know what the official story is, but she's been making phone calls. To her mother, to my dispatch station. She's asking for help, and I think you know more than you've told anyone." The door opened a crack, secured by a chain, and I could see part of Kevin's face. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, the appearance of someone who hadn't slept properly in months. You shouldn't be here. If they know you're asking questions, they'll come for you too. Who's they? He laughed, but it was bitter and empty. You really don't know? You work for them and you don't even know what they're doing? He closed the door and I heard the chain sliding off. Then it opened fully and he gestured for me to come inside quickly. The apartment was small and cluttered with telecommunications equipment, multiple computers, cables everywhere, the kind of setup that suggested either a serious hobbyist or someone doing something illegal. Kevin closed the door behind me and locked 3 separate locks. Rebecca found something at Meridian Health Solutions, clinical trial data that was being falsified. People were dying from adverse reactions to an experimental drug, and the company was covering it up, bribing FDA officials, hiding the bodies. She documented everything, copied files, built a case. She was going to blow the whistle. He sat down heavily on his couch. They found out. I don't know how, but they found out. And they decided she needed to disappear. Not just die, actually disappear in a way that no one would ever question. I felt cold despite the warm apartment. You're saying Meridian Health Solutions killed her? Staged the accident? Kevin shook his head. Not Meridian. Someone above them. Someone with access to law enforcement databases, coroner's reports, phone records. Someone who could make it look completely legitimate. They took Rebecca and they put her somewhere, and they've been keeping her alive because she knows things. Information they need about who else she told, where she kept her evidence, what her backup plans were. How do you know this? He gestured to his equipment. Because I've been tracking the calls. Every time Rebecca manages to get a signal out, I'm monitoring it. She's calling from a VoIP system that's been routed through multiple proxy servers to hide its origin, but she's not the one doing the routing. She's being allowed to make these calls, controlled calls that go to numbers they've pre-selected, calls that they can monitor and track to see who responds and how. They're using her as bait. I felt sick. So when she called 911 last night, they were testing you, seeing if you'd follow up, if you'd believe her, if you'd be a problem. And now you're here, which means you failed their test. Kevin pulled up a screen on one of his computers showing call routing data I couldn't fully understand. There's more. Rebecca's not the only one. I've identified at least 7 other null callers over the past 2 years. All of them connected to whistleblowers or people who had information that powerful organizations wanted suppressed. All of them supposedly died in accidents or suicides. All of them making periodic calls to emergency services or family members, begging for help, and all of those calls flagged with that null designation that makes them officially not exist. He pulled up a list of names and I recognized one immediately. David Foster, a bank executive who'd supposedly jumped off the Vista Bridge 8 months ago. I'd handled the 911 call from a witness who'd seen him fall. David Foster called his wife 3 times after his supposed death, Kevin said. Each call lasted less than a minute, same pattern as Rebecca's calls. His wife tried to report it to police and was told she needed psychiatric evaluation. She's in a mental health facility now, being treated for delusional disorder. I looked at the other names on the list. Why hasn't anyone else noticed this pattern? Kevin laughed that bitter laugh again. Because the pattern is deliberately obscured. The calls are spaced out over months, handled by different dispatchers, flagged with a designation that supervisors are trained to dismiss. And anyone who does start asking questions gets shut down fast. You went to Derek about the call, right? And he told you it was a glitch? I nodded. Have you tried going higher up the chain? Kevin's expression answered before he spoke. Derek's not ignorant. He's complicit. So is everyone above him. The Null Caller system isn't a bug, Natalie. It's a feature. It's a way for certain organizations to keep whistleblowers alive long enough to extract information while simultaneously ensuring that any attempts by those people to reach out for help are automatically flagged and dismissed. He pulled up another screen showing what looked like internal memos from the Portland Police Bureau. I've been hacking into secure systems for 6 months, trying to understand how deep this goes. It's not just Meridian Health Solutions. There are pharmaceutical companies, defense contractors, tech firms, banks, all of them participating in this system. When someone becomes a problem, when someone knows too much, they don't kill them right away. They null them. They fake their death. They take them to a secure facility. They keep them alive but completely cut off from the outside world. And when these people manage to make calls, those calls are automatically routed through the Null Caller system that ensures no one will ever believe them or investigate. I sat down because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. How many secure facilities are there? Kevin pulled up a map with 7 locations marked around the Portland metro area. These are the ones I've identified so far. Abandoned warehouses, decommissioned government buildings, industrial facilities that are officially empty but have suspicious power usage and security. Rebecca's calls originate from different locations every time, which suggests they're moving her around to prevent anyone from finding her. But I've narrowed down the pattern. The last 3 calls came from a radius of about 5 miles, all in the Northwest Industrial District. He zoomed in on the map. There's an old pharmaceutical storage facility on Yon Avenue that was supposedly shut down in 2019. But satellite imagery shows regular vehicle traffic, and power company records show electricity usage consistent with a building that's occupied. I think that's where they're keeping her now. I stared at the map. We need to call the police, the FBI, someone with actual authority to investigate this. Kevin turned to me with an expression of profound sadness. Natalie, the police are part of the system. The FBI is part of the system. Everyone with authority is either complicit or has been trained to dismiss null caller reports as glitches. You're a low-level dispatcher who took one call. You have no evidence that would hold up in any investigation. You have testimony from a grieving mother who everyone thinks is having a breakdown, and information from me that was obtained through illegal hacking. If you try to go through official channels, you'll be shut down immediately, and probably fired for violation of protocol. Worse, you'll alert them that Rebecca's been making contact, and they'll either move her somewhere we can't find, or they'll decide she's no longer useful and actually kill her this time. He was right, and I hated it. So, what do you suggest? Kevin pulled out a bag from under his couch containing what looked like tactical equipment: flashlights, bolt cutters, a radio scanner, pepper spray. We go to that facility tonight and we get her out. Once she's free, once she's somewhere safe, then we can worry about exposing the system and bringing these people to justice. But first we have to save her life. Every instinct I had that had been trained through 3 years of emergency dispatch was screaming at me that this was dangerous and stupid and would probably get us both killed. But I kept thinking about Rebecca's voice on that call, the genuine terror, the desperate plea for help. I kept thinking about Susan Caldwell's red-rimmed eyes and her grip on my hand and her insistence that she knew her daughter's voice. And I kept thinking about the 7 other names on Kevin's list, 7 other people who'd been disappeared and nulled and were calling out for help that would never come because the system was designed to ignore them. What time do we leave? Kevin checked his watch. 2 a.m. Security shift change happens at midnight and there's about 15 minutes of chaos when the new guards are getting briefed. That's our window. I went home and tried to sleep but couldn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote out everything I knew, every detail about the calls, about Rebecca Caldwell, about the null caller system, about Kevin's investigation. I put it in an envelope addressed to a friend who was a journalist at the Oregonian with a note that said, "If anything happens to me, investigate this." I wasn't naive enough to think that would be sufficient protection, but it was better than nothing. At 1:30 a.m., I met Kevin in a parking lot half a mile from the Yon Avenue facility. He handed me a tactical vest that felt heavier than it should, and when I looked inside, I saw he'd added metal plates for protection. "You think we'll need body armor?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I think we need to be prepared for worst-case scenarios." We approached the facility on foot, staying in shadows, moving slowly. Kevin had been right about the building being occupied. There were lights on in several windows, security cameras mounted at corners, a gate with an electronic lock that Kevin bypassed in under a minute using some kind of device he pulled from his bag. "Learned that from YouTube," he whispered, and despite everything, I almost laughed. The building was massive, at least 100,000 square feet, and we had no idea where inside Rebecca might be held. Kevin had brought a thermal imaging device that showed heat signatures through walls, and we moved methodically through the ground floor, checking each room. Most were empty or filled with old pharmaceutical equipment, exactly what you'd expect in an abandoned storage facility. Then on the second floor, in what looked like it had once been an administrative area, we found them. 6 cells, constructed from reinforced steel, each containing a person. The thermal imaging showed them clearly, heat signatures sitting or lying down, alive but not moving much. Kevin pointed to the 3rd cell and made a gesture that I interpreted as, "That's her." We needed to get closer, needed to verify it was actually Rebecca before we tried any kind of rescue. The corridor leading to the cells was monitored by 2 cameras, but Kevin had come prepared with a device that looped the camera feed, giving us a 30-second window to move. We ran down the corridor and I pressed my face to the narrow window in the 3rd cell door. The woman inside was sitting on a metal bench, head down, dirty clothes, matted hair. But when she looked up at the sound of footsteps, I saw her face clearly. It was Rebecca Caldwell, unmistakably, the same woman from the obituary photo, but thinner and more exhausted. "Rebecca," I whispered through the door. "Your mother sent me. We're going to get you out." Her eyes widened and she stood up quickly, moving to the door. "You're real? You're actually here? This isn't another test?" Kevin was already working on the electronic lock, his device making soft beeping sounds as it cycled through combinations. "How many guards are in the building?" I asked Rebecca. 2 on this floor, maybe 4 total. They change shifts at midnight, but there are cameras everywhere and if you trigger an alarm, the whole building locks down. Kevin's device beeped triumphantly, and the lock clicked open. Rebecca stumbled out of the cell and I caught her, feeling how thin she was, how weak. "We need to go now," Kevin said, but Rebecca grabbed his arm. "We have to free the others. We can't leave them here." I looked at Kevin and saw the same calculation I was making. Freeing 6 people instead of 1 would take time we didn't have, would make noise we couldn't afford, would absolutely trigger security response. But Rebecca was right. We couldn't leave them. Kevin started working on the next cell while I helped Rebecca stay upright. The second cell contained a man in his 50s who looked like he'd been there even longer than Rebecca. barely able to stand. The third cell held a younger woman who immediately tried to run the moment the door opened, and I had to grab her and explain quietly that we were rescue, not guards. We'd freed 4 of the 6 when the alarm went off, a piercing electronic shriek that echoed through the whole building. "Shit," Kevin said, which was an understatement. "We need to move now. Everyone who can walk, follow me. Everyone who can't, Natalie and I will help you." We moved as fast as possible back toward the stairs, but we could hear footsteps below us, multiple people shouting voices. Kevin pulled out pepper spray and I did the same, forming a protective barrier around the former prisoners. 2 guards appeared at the bottom of the stairwell and Kevin sprayed them both before they could react, and we pushed past them while they were coughing and temporarily blinded. Then we were outside, running across the parking lot toward the fence. Behind us, I heard more shouting, saw flashlights cutting through the darkness. Kevin cut the fence with bolt cutters and we pushed everyone through, one by one, Rebecca helping the weakest ones because despite everything she was still thinking about others before herself. We'd made it about 2 blocks when headlights appeared behind us and a van screeched to a stop, blocking our path. 4 people got out, not dressed like security guards but wearing business casual clothes, moving with coordinated precision. The woman in front had gray hair and a face that might have been kind under different circumstances. "Mr. Russo, Miss Kemp, you're interfering with a classified federal operation. These individuals are being held under sealed court orders related to national security. You need to surrender them immediately." Kevin laughed. "National security? These people are whistleblowers. They were going to expose corporate corruption and you disappeared them." The woman's expression didn't change. "These individuals possess information that could cause significant harm to critical infrastructure and economic stability. They're being held temporarily while that information is secured and neutralized. Once the threat is contained, they'll be released with new identities and financial compensation." I looked at Rebecca, at her hollow eyes and malnourished frame, at the way she was trembling. "That's a lie. You've been torturing them for information and you're never planning to let them go." The woman sighed. "You're right. I apologize for attempting to maintain the fiction. These people will never be released because they know too much about too many protected interests. But their treatment has been humane within the constraints of their situation, and their families have been allowed to grieve and move on. You're disrupting a carefully balanced system that has prevented significant economic and social instability." I felt rage building in my chest, pure and hot. "You're murdering people to protect corporate profits. You're torturing them to extract information about other whistleblowers so you can disappear them too. There's nothing balanced about that system." The woman nodded to her associates and they started moving toward us. Kevin pulled something else from his bag, something that made my heart stop when I recognized it. A gun. "Kevin, don't..." But he wasn't pointing it at the people. He was pointing it at the ground between us. "I have a dead man's switch in my apartment. If I don't input a code within the next hour, everything I've collected about the Null Caller system goes to every major news organization simultaneously. Every name, every facility location, every internal memo I've hacked. You let us leave with these people, and I'll input the code and keep the information suppressed for now. You try to stop us, and the whole system gets exposed." The woman's expression finally showed emotion. Fury. "You're bluffing. That information would be dismissed as conspiracy theory." "Maybe, but it would also trigger investigations, congressional hearings, public attention. Even if 90% of people dismissed it, the 10% who believed it would be enough to make your system unworkable. You need people to believe the official story, to accept that these people are dead. Once doubt enters the equation, once families start demanding second autopsies and law enforcement agencies start competing for jurisdiction, your carefully balanced system collapses." The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. Then the woman gestured to her associates and they stepped back. "You have 48 hours before we locate your dead man's switch and neutralize it. After that, there will be consequences for everyone involved in tonight's activities." We ran, all of us, moving through back streets and alleys until we reached Kevin's backup vehicle that he'd positioned 3 blocks away. We piled in, 8 people in a van meant for 6, and Kevin drove recklessly toward the one place he thought might offer temporary safety. A church in North Portland where the pastor had a reputation for helping people who fell through society's cracks. Pastor Elizabeth Morales took one look at our group, at Rebecca and the other former prisoners in their filthy clothes and haunted expressions, and asked no questions before leading us to the church basement. She brought food, water, clean clothes, and medical supplies, then pulled Kevin and me aside. "I don't need to know details about what you've done, but I need to know if bringing these people here puts my congregation at risk." Kevin explained the situation in broad terms, and Elizabeth's expression shifted from concern to cold determination. "I've seen this before. People disappeared by powerful interests, families destroyed by lies. I'll help however I can, but you need a better plan than hiding in my church basement." I knew she was right. Kevin's dead man's switch bought us 48 hours at most, and then the people who ran the Null Caller system would come for all of us. We needed to expose the system so thoroughly and publicly that suppressing it would be impossible. I called my journalist friend at the Oregonian and explained everything, expecting skepticism, but she'd apparently received my envelope and had already started preliminary investigation. "I need interviews with the freed prisoners on camera. I need Kevin's hacked documents, And I need you to go on record about the Null Caller designation and your supervisor's response. If we can get all of that in the next 24 hours, I can have a story ready that will be impossible to suppress. We worked through the night, Rebecca and the others giving detailed interviews about their kidnapping and imprisonment, Kevin turning over copies of everything he'd collected, me writing out a formal statement about dispatch protocols and the systematic dismissal of Null Caller reports. By noon the next day, the story went live on the Oregonian's website with a headline that read, "Disappeared, How Portland's Emergency System is Used to Silence Whistleblowers." The response was immediate and explosive. Other news organizations picked up the story, social media amplified it, and within 6 hours congressional representatives were calling for federal investigations. The Portland Police Bureau issued a statement denying all allegations, and Meridian Health Solutions stock crashed as investors panicked about potential criminal liability. That evening, Derek called me. "Natalie, what the hell did you do? The whole department is in chaos. Internal Affairs is investigating everyone who's ever handled a Null Caller designation. My phone won't stop ringing with calls from lawyers and federal agents." I felt no sympathy. "How long have you known, Derek? How long have you been helping disappear whistleblowers?" There was a long silence. 3 years, since right before you started. I was told it was a matter of national security, that these people posed genuine threats, that the system was necessary to prevent catastrophic economic damage. I believed it because I wanted to believe it, because the alternative meant accepting that I was complicit in kidnapping and torture. His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I should have questioned it, should have investigated, should have done something other than tell new dispatchers to ignore the calls." "Are there others? Other dispatchers who know?" "Maybe a dozen citywide. All of them told the same story about national security and economic stability. All of us convinced ourselves we were protecting people rather than betraying them." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm cooperating fully with the investigation. I know it doesn't make up for what I've done, but I'm going to help expose every person and organization involved in this system." Over the next week, the investigations expanded rapidly. The FBI, apparently not entirely compromised despite Kevin's fears, raided 4 facilities and freed 17 more prisoners. Congressional hearings began with whistleblower testimony about corporate retaliation programs. The Portland Police Bureau's entire command structure resigned under pressure. Meridian Health Solutions faced criminal charges, and 3 FDA officials were arrested for accepting bribes. Rebecca Caldwell was reunited with her parents in a scene that made me cry, even though I was watching it on television rather than in person. Susan held her daughter and wouldn't let go, and I thought about how close we'd come to losing all of this, how close the system had come to working exactly as designed. I was fired from my dispatch position, which I'd expected, but I'd become enough of a public figure that 3 different private investigation firms offered me jobs specializing in finding people who'd been disappeared. Kevin partnered with a nonprofit organization to develop technology that could detect when phone calls were being routed through suppression systems. The former prisoners started a support group and advocacy organization, pushing for legislation that would protect whistleblowers and make the kind of disappearance system we'd uncovered illegal. 6 months later, Rebecca Caldwell testified before Congress about her experience, describing in detail the 6 months she'd spent imprisoned, the interrogations, the psychological torture designed to break her and force her to reveal where she'd hidden her evidence about Meridian's falsified drug trials. Her testimony was devastating and led directly to new federal whistleblower protection laws that made corporate retaliation a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentences. I attended the hearing, and afterward Rebecca found me in the hallway outside the chamber. We didn't say much, just hugged for a long time, 2 women who'd been changed by a system that was designed to break people who tried to do the right thing. "Thank you for believing me," she said quietly. "Thank you for not dismissing my call as a glitch." I thought about that Null 47 active designation blinking on my screen, about Derek's insistence that it meant nothing, about all the times in the past 3 years I might have received similar calls and never questioned the official story. I almost did dismiss it. I almost logged it as a technical error and moved on. We were that close to you staying in that cell forever. The system is different now, better in some ways, though I know there are probably other suppression mechanisms we haven't uncovered yet. But at least the Null Caller designation doesn't exist anymore. At least dispatchers are trained to investigate impossible calls rather than dismiss them. At least 17 people are alive and free who wouldn't have been without one random call landing on my station at exactly the right moment when I was curious enough and stubborn enough to question what I was being told. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.